Daddy, I'm hungry. 6-year-old Harper tugged on Felix Walker's sleeve as they stood in the long grocery store line, her big blue eyes locking onto the candy rack beside them. Felix let out a breath and glanced at the granola bar in his coat pocket, the last one from the box he'd stretched all week. He looked down at his daughter, her cheeks rosy from the cold outside, her pink gloves worn thin at the fingertips. Without hesitation, he pulled out the granola bar, tore it in half, and handed one piece to her. "Here, sweetheart, half for you, half for me, all right," Harper grinned, taking the piece with both hands. "We can share like best friends." Felix smiled and took a small bite of his half, just enough to keep the hunger at bay. Behind him, a woman's voice caught his ear. "You know, I don't think I've ever seen someone split a granola bar more dramatically." He turned to find a woman standing behind them in line. She had smooth, dark hair pulled back in a sleek, low ponytail, a long camel-colored coat that probably cost more than his rent, and a quiet confidence in her voice. Felix gave a small laugh. "You ever try one of these off-brand bars? You gotta make a show of it to distract from the taste." The woman smiled, amused. "I'll take your word for it. You want a bite?" He joked, holding up what was left of his crumbly half. She tilted her head, considering. "Sure, why not?" He blinked, stunned. She actually leaned forward and took a small bite of the bar, chewing thoughtfully. "Not bad." Felix laughed, shaking his head. "You're braver than most." "I've had worse," she said. "Once ate a protein bar from a vending machine at a gas station in Nevada. Tasted like punishment." Harper giggled, clearly enjoying the exchange. "My daddy says those bars are made by aliens." The woman knelt so she was eye level with Harper. "Aliens, huh, that explains a lot." Harper nodded solemnly. "They're trying to take over Earth one snack at a time." Felix glanced between the woman and his daughter, a warmth spreading in his chest that had nothing to do with food. "Well, now we're all doomed." The cashier called for the next customer, and Felix stepped forward, pulling items slowly from a basket, just enough essentials to last the week. Eggs, bread, a few apples, and Harper's favorite cereal. He handed over a crumpled 20 and watched the total climb to over 30. His stomach dropped. He began pulling items off the belt. "Okay, let's take off the cereal, and I've got it." He turned, puzzled, as the woman stepped up and handed the cashier a black credit card. "Put it all on mine." Felix straightened. "No, I can't let you do that. Consider it payment for the granola bar." She smiled, but there was something firm in her tone that said she wasn't backing down. "I don't even know your name." "Savina," she said. "Savina Zeller." "Felix," he replied slowly. "Felix Walker, and that's Harper." Savina gave Harper a wink. "Nice to meet you both." Outside, as snow flurries drifted through the sky, Felix lifted Harper into their old, beat-up sedan. He turned back to thank Savina again, but she was already walking away, disappearing around the corner like some kind of winter mirage. He never expected to see her again. Savina didn't expect to think about the man with the kind eyes and the little girl with the alien snack theories, either. But she did, all week. She was back in her towering glass office at Zeller Tech headquarters, 60 stories above the city, conference rooms named after Greek gods, assistants buzzing in and out with reports and coffee. She was used to men in tailored suits, women with degrees and sharp smiles, and board meetings that lasted longer than her last relationship. But her mind kept drifting to that simple moment in line. The way Felix had looked at his daughter with so much love, like he'd give her the world if he could. The way he'd offered his last bit of food to a stranger without hesitation. It was rare, that kind of kindness, and it stuck with her. The second time they met, it wasn't fate, not exactly. It was Harper, and a broken boot. Felix was crouched on the sidewalk outside Harper's school, trying to tie her snow boot with frozen fingers when he heard a voice behind him. "You again." He looked up, startled. Savina, she was holding a coffee tray and a smile. "You dropped your wallet," he blinked. "How did you?" "I saw you walking into the school," recognized Harper's hat, very sparkly. Harper beamed. "Daddy says it's like a disco ball for your head." Savina crouched to Harper's level and handed her a warm, hot chocolate from the tray. "I brought this for the disco queen," Harper gasped. This is better than cereal, Felix stood, stuffing his wallet back into his coat. You really didn't have to, I wanted to. She handed him one of the coffees. I was actually hoping I'd run into you again. He blinked, caught off guard. You were. I don't usually take detours through school zones on my way to the office, she said. But lately I've found myself doing exactly that. Felix looked at her, his heart thudding a little harder. Why? Because I like how I feel when I talk to you, she said simply. And I think there's something here, something I'd like to explore. He stared at her for a long second, then looked down at Harper, who was already sipping her hot chocolate like it was the elixir of life. I don't have much, he said quietly. I'm not sure I can offer you anything close to the world you're used to. Savina's voice was soft. I don't need the world, Felix, I just need something real. He couldn't stop the smile that overtook his face. Then how about dinner, he asked. Nothing fancy. I make a mean grilled cheese. Savina grinned. I'll bring dessert. That night, Felix cleaned his tiny apartment like it was going up for sale. Harper helped scrub the floors while wearing a princess gown, and the grilled cheese sandwiches were grilled to perfection if slightly uneven, because one of the burners only worked half the time. When Savina showed up, she didn't flinch at the cracked walls or the second-hand furniture. She sat on the floor with Harper, helped her build a Lego castle, and told them stories about her childhood growing up in Ohio before Zeller Tech became a global name. Felix watched her laugh with Harper, her eyes crinkling at the corners, and something inside him shifted. He didn't know how a moment in a grocery store line could lead to this, but he was starting to believe in possibilities again. Felix's hands were still dusted with flour from the pie crust he'd rolled out when the knock came at the door the following Friday. He wiped them on a dish towel, heart thudding a little too fast, and opened it to find Savina holding a brown paper bag and a bottle of red wine with a gold foil top. You cook, she said by way of greeting, glancing past him toward the kitchen where Harper was sitting on a stool, humming while arranging apple slices into a fan on top of the pie. I bake, Felix said, stepping aside to let her in. Well, I try to. Harper's the boss. I just follow instructions. Savina held up the wine. This might not pair with apple pie, but I figured we could risk it. We live dangerously around here, he said, taking the bottle with a grin. In the kitchen, Harper waved a sticky apple slice in greeting. Hi, Miss Savina, guess what? We're making pie for the art show tomorrow. Savina folded her coat over one arm and leaned on the counter. An art show, Felix nodded as he pulled down glasses. It's a fundraiser at the community center. Harper's class made sculptures out of recycled stuff. She built a rocket ship out of egg cartons and bottle caps. I added wings this morning, Harper said proudly. Now it can fly to Jupiter. Savina's eyes lit up. You'll have to show me tomorrow. I've always wanted to see Jupiter. Felix poured the wine. You're welcome to come. It's nothing fancy, but it's a good time. She met his gaze over the rim of her glass. I'd love that. Later that night, after Harper had gone to bed and the empty pie tins sat on the counter like proof of a small victory, Felix and Savina found themselves on the fire escape just outside the kitchen window. It overlooked a row of narrow backyards, strings of laundry swaying in the cold wind, and the distant hum of the city far below. You ever think about leaving all this? She asked, her voice quiet. He raised a brow. You mean the fire escape? She gave a soft laugh. No, I mean this life. This neighborhood, the constant stretch of $1. He leaned back against the railing, fingers wrapped around the warm mug of tea he'd made her. More times than I can count. But then Harper will do something like paint a mural on her bedroom wall and call it space art, and I remember why I stay. She's got roots here, and honestly, I think I do too. Savina traced the edge of her mug. I admire that. He looked at her, catching the way the light from the window behind them lit the edges of her hair. What about you? Do you ever think about getting away from your world? She gave a long exhale. Every morning I wake up in a penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view worth more than some entire buildings. And yet, sometimes I wish I could just disappear into a crowd, no one saying my last name like it's a brand, no one watching every move I make. He studied her for a moment. I think I know a place where you can be invisible. Want to come? She blinked. Now, he grinned. Why not? They left Harper with Mrs. Denton from next door, who'd babysat since Harper was in diapers and bundled up in coats and scarves before heading out. Felix led Savina down 2 blocks, then into a tiny alley between a laundromat and a pawn shop. A rusted metal door opened into a bowling alley that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 70s. The lights flickered. The pins reset with a groan. But the place smelled like buttered popcorn and wood polish, and the guy behind the counter greeted Felix with a fist bump. "Lane 5's open," he said. "Try not to break anything this time, Walker," Savina laughed. "You come here often, more than a grown man should," Felix said, grabbing a pair of neon orange shoes from the rack. She hesitated, eyeing the shoes. "I haven't bowled since I was 14. "Perfect," he said. "We're evenly matched." "I'm terrible." They spent the next 2 hours laughing harder than either had in months. Felix bowled like a man wrestling a ghost. Savina threw her ball so gently it barely made it down the lane. They didn't keep score, didn't talk about work, didn't talk about responsibilities. They just existed in that sliver of time as two people who might have met anywhere without titles, without expectations. As they walked back through the cold, Felix shoved his hands into his coat pockets. "You know, I was half convinced you'd ghost me after last week." She glanced over. "Why?" "Because women like you don't usually stick around for guys like me." She stopped walking. "Women like me," he turned toward her. "You're brilliant, you're polished, you probably know what fork to use at a 7-course dinner." She stepped closer. "I also know how to clean a fish, change a tire, and patch drywall," he blinked. "Seriously, I wasn't always CEO of anything. My dad ran a hardware store in Dayton. I stocked shelves every summer from age 8 on." He laughed, surprised. "That explains the drywall." She looked up at him, her breath soft clouds in the air. "I don't want easy, Felix, I want real. And you're the most real thing I've found in a long time." Without thinking, he leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't showy or fast. It was slow, steady, like the first time you trust a bridge will hold if you cross it. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. "I've wanted to do that since the granola bar," she whispered. He smiled. "Me too." The next day, the community center buzzed with noise and color. Children darted between tables, art projects lined every wall, and a raffle booth sold tickets for a donated bicycle. Harper's rocket sculpture stood proudly on a pedestal of stacked milk crates, glittering under the fluorescent lights. Savina knelt beside her. "I love the wings." "I think they're what make it fly," Harper beamed. "Daddy helped me cut them out of a pizza box." Felix watched from a few feet away, heart caught somewhere between disbelief and gratitude. He'd lived so long in survival mode, he'd forgotten what hope felt like when it wasn't wrapped in fear. A man in a suit approached Savina hesitantly. "Miss Zeller, I didn't expect to see you here." Savina stood slowly, her smile polite but cool. "I'm off the clock, Gregory. It's just the board meeting Monday." "We were wondering if you'd reviewed the merger terms." Felix stiffened, watching the exchange. Savina cut in before the man could continue. "I'll send notes Sunday night. Enjoy the art." Her tone brooked no argument. As the man shuffled away, Felix approached. "You okay?" "Fine," she said, brushing it off. "Just someone who forgot there's a difference between my schedule and my soul." He touched her hand. "I didn't realize you're dealing with that kind of pressure." She looked at him, eyes soft. "You don't have to protect me, Felix." "I'm not fragile." "I know," he said, "but I still want to." That night, as Harper slept with glitter still in her hair, Savina and Felix sat on the couch, her legs folded beneath her, his arm resting along the back. "You ever think maybe the universe knew what it was doing?" she asked. He looked at her. When it dropped me behind you in that checkout line," he smiled slowly. "If that's true, I owe the universe a thank you pie," she laughed, leaning into him. "Make it cherry and make it soon." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Deal?" The first time Felix saw the inside of Savina's world, it was because she handed him a key card. They stood outside a steel and glass building in Midtown, the kind of place where the sidewalk was heated and the doorman wore white gloves. She pressed the slim black card into his palm. "It's for the elevator," she said, her voice steady, though something in her eyes betrayed nerves. "Penthouse button only works with it." Felix looked at the card, then at her. "You sure? I want you to see where I come from." He followed her through the marbled lobby, past a concierge who nodded respectfully into a private elevator that rose without sound. The ride took less than a minute, but his heartbeat kept time with every floor. When the doors opened, they stepped into an open space flooded with natural light. The skyline unfolded on all sides, framed by towering windows. The furniture was sleek, the art bold and abstract, and a grand piano sat untouched in one corner like a sculpture. Felix stepped forward slowly. "This is another planet." Savina set her keys down on a glass console. "It's just home." He turned to her. "You don't sound convinced." She took a breath and crossed to the window, arms folding across her chest. "It's beautiful, sure, but it's always quiet, too quiet. Sometimes I come home and forget if I've eaten. I can't remember the last time I sat on that couch and felt like I belonged there." Felix stepped beside her but didn't speak. The silence between them wasn't heavy, it was listening. Finally, she turned her head. "I brought you here because I don't want there to be walls between us, not even the glass ones." He looked out at the city, then back at her. "I don't care about the walls. I care about who's inside them." She leaned into him then, not with desperation but with relief, as if she'd been holding her breath for days. That night he stayed. Not out of impulse, but because leaving felt like walking away from something unspoken but vital. He didn't sleep in her bed, he slept on the couch, Harper safely at home with Mrs. Denton. But when he woke in the morning, she was sitting nearby, a cup of coffee in her hands, watching the sunrise like it was the first she'd ever bothered to notice. "You know," she said without looking away, "I used to think vulnerability was a liability. Now I'm starting to think it's a luxury most people never get to afford." Felix sat up, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. "You're allowed to be both strong and open, Savina. That's not a contradiction." "That's rare." She glanced at him, her mouth softening. "I'm learning." The weeks that followed unfolded with a rhythm that neither of them had expected. They didn't announce their relationship to anyone. They didn't need to. It was in the way they started finishing each other's thoughts, the way Harper reached for Savina's hand without hesitation, the way Felix kept a toothbrush in her penthouse, and she kept a pair of sneakers in his tiny hallway closet. But nothing stays untouched forever. It started with a headline. Zeller Tech CEO linked to single father in Brooklyn. The photo was grainy, clearly taken from a distance, but unmistakable. Felix handing Harper a bagel while Savina laughed beside them near a food truck. Felix found the newspaper folded on his doorstep one morning. He stared at it for a long time before Harper tugged on his flannel sleeve. "Is that you?" "Yeah," he said slowly, folding it shut. "Guess someone thought we were interesting." When Savina arrived that afternoon, she didn't look surprised. She was holding her phone, her jaw tight. "Publicist called me 5 times before noon," she said, dropping her bag onto the couch. "Board wants to know if I'm serious about the optics." Felix raised an eyebrow. "That code for why are you dating someone without a trust fund?" she exhaled, pacing. "They're worried it'll distract from the merger. One of them actually suggested I keep things quiet until the press cycle moves on." His expression didn't change. "What did you say?" "I told them to worry about the numbers, not my personal life." He stood slowly. "You sure about that?" She turned to him, frowning. "Why wouldn't I be? I just..." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I don't want to cost you anything, Savina, not your reputation, not your company. I'm not embarrassed about us, but I didn't sign up to become a headline." She crossed the room and placed her hands on his chest. "You didn't cost me anything. They did with their assumptions and their arrogance. You and Harper. You're the only part of my life that doesn't feel like a negotiation." His eyes searched hers. "Even if it gets harder, I'm not looking for easy," she said. "I'm looking for real, and I'm not going to hide the best thing that's happened to me." Still, the pressure didn't let up. 2 days later, Felix got a call from a woman claiming to be with a private foundation that offered support services to families in transitional phases. When he asked what she meant, she said she'd been referred by a mutual contact with concern for Harper's long-term well-being. He hung up before she finished the sentence, his jaw tight. That night, he told Savina, she sat on the edge of his couch, her face pale with fury. "They're trying to scare you off. Is it working?" he asked, not accusing, just searching. She lifted her eyes to his. "Not a chance." But Felix wasn't as sure. He'd spent years building a world small enough to keep Harper safe. Now that world was being stretched under the weight of scrutiny, and he wasn't sure how much more it could hold. The tipping point came at Harper's school. He arrived to find her in the principal's office, not because she'd done anything wrong, but because someone had shown up asking questions. About her home life. About her father's employment. About who picked her up and when. Savina was there within 20 minutes, storming into the office not as a CEO but as someone who'd been pushed too far. "Who authorized someone to speak with her?" she demanded, voice like steel. The principal stammered. "We were told it was a routine welfare check." "By whom?" The silence was answer enough. Felix stood, fists clenched. "She's 6. You don't get to use her like leverage." That night they didn't speak much. Harper fell asleep early, exhausted from the tension. Felix sat on the fire escape, looking out at nothing. Savina joined him, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She sat beside him without a word for a solid minute. Then, "I never wanted you to be caught in the crossfire." "I know," he said quietly. "I thought I could protect you both. You tried, that counts for something." She looked at him then. "But not enough," he turned to her. "This isn't about whether it's enough. This is about whether it's sustainable for Harper, for us." Savina's eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. "Tell me what you need. I need to know that this doesn't break us, that we don't let them win." She reached out, threading her fingers through his. "Then we fight, together," he nodded slowly. "Together." But even as he said it, he knew something had to change, because love was one thing. But protecting his daughter, that was everything. And if that meant making a sacrifice, he was already bracing for it. Felix stood outside the community center's auditorium. Harper's latest painting rolled under his arm, trying to breathe through the knot in his chest. It had been a week since the school incident. A week since the phone calls stopped. A week since he'd made the hardest choice of his life, stepping back from Savina without telling her why. He hadn't answered her last 2 messages. Not because he didn't want to, but because he couldn't give her the life she deserved while shielding Harper from the fallout of being linked to someone like her. She was fighting battles in boardrooms he couldn't walk into without feeling like an imposter. And no matter how much she said it didn't matter, Felix saw the way the world treated her when she stood next to him. Like she was slumming it. Like she was making a mistake. He'd rather hurt her once than let her be slowly dismantled by whispers. But that didn't mean it didn't tear him apart. Inside the auditorium, children were lining up to show off their projects. Harper waved from the stage, her hair tied up with a strand of tinsel she'd found in the art bin. She looked proud, unbothered. He envied the clear, uncomplicated way she saw people. To her, Savina wasn't a CEO. She was just the woman who brought hot chocolate and stayed up helping glue bottle caps onto cardboard rockets. As the room filled, Felix took a seat in the second row. He was just pulling Harper's water bottle from his backpack when the door at the back of the room opened. Savina walked in. She wasn't dressed like the woman from the penthouse or the polished executive who once lit up headlines. She wore a soft gray sweater, jeans, and sneakers. Her hair was tied in a loose braid over one shoulder. She looked like someone who had finally decided to stop performing. She scanned the room, found him, and walked straight down the aisle. He stood, heart thudding, unsure if she would walk past or stop. She stopped. "Why did you disappear?" Her voice was low, firm, not angry, but worse, hurt. "I thought I was protecting you," he said quietly. "From what? From me, from all of this?" He gestured vaguely around them. "From the way people talk when someone like you falls for someone like me." She took a deep breath. "You think I don't know what they say. You think I haven't heard worse. I've been measured against men who thought I existed to look good in a quarterly report. I've been told I'm too cold, too ambitious, too much. But no one has ever made me feel more like myself than you do." Felix glanced toward the stage, where Harper was waiting her turn, then back at Savina. "I didn't know how to stand next to you and not feel like the world was laughing. Then don't look at them." "Look at me." He couldn't speak. Savina reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "This came in the mail 3 days ago. I wasn't going to show you, but I'm done letting fear make decisions for me." She handed it over. He unfolded it slowly. His eyes scanned the page, then widened. "You started a foundation for single parents," she said. "Specifically those working multiple jobs, food insecurity, housing support, childcare. I've already seeded it with $5 million, and I named it after your daughter." Felix's chest tightened. Savina, you inspired it, but it's not about you, or me. It's about every parent who's ever had to choose between rent and medicine, between working late and tucking their kid in. He looked at her, stunned. I know you're proud, she said. I know you don't want to take anything from me. But this isn't charity, Felix. This is legacy, and you're a part of it whether you like it or not. Harper's name was called, and they both turned to the stage. She skipped forward, holding up her painting, a swirling mix of stars and city skylines with a rocket ship flying between them. This is about finding magic in the middle of the mess, she announced. My daddy says sometimes the best things happen when you're not looking for them. The room chuckled warmly. Felix's throat burned. When the applause died down, Harper bounded back to her seat and leaned into Savina's side like it was the most natural thing in the world. Did you see it? I did, Savina said, wrapping an arm around her. It was perfect. Felix watched them, something breaking loose in his chest. After the event, they stepped outside together. Snow was starting to fall, dusting the sidewalk. Harper was already skipping ahead toward the car with Mrs. Denton, who'd offered to take her for ice cream. Felix turned to Savina, words catching behind his teeth. I was wrong, he said finally. I thought I had to protect you from my life, but maybe I just needed to let you be part of it. I never wanted a pedestal, she said. I wanted a place next to you. He stepped closer. I was scared. So was I. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, folded napkin. He handed it to her. She opened it slowly. Inside was half a granola bar. She laughed, eyes shining. You kept it, made a fresh one, he said. Figured if I was going to do this right, I had to start at the beginning. She bit off a corner. Still terrible, still worth sharing. He leaned in and kissed her, not tentative, not cautious, but full of every moment they'd almost lost. As the snow fell harder, he pulled back. Come home with me, she smiled. I was already on my way. That night, back at Felix's apartment, they made spaghetti with too much garlic and danced in the kitchen to old soul records. Harper painted stars on the bathroom mirror and declared it the space station. And when the lights dimmed and the city outside stretched quiet and wide, they sat on the couch, tangled together in the kind of silence that asked for nothing and gave everything. Felix looked at Savina. You've changed my whole life, she touched his cheek. You reminded me I had one. In the spring, the Harper Walker Foundation opened its first community center. Felix cut the ribbon. Harper wore a cape. Savina stood beside them, not as a CEO, but as someone who'd found the place she belonged. They didn't need a wedding to prove anything. They didn't need headlines to validate what they already knew. They had each other, and that was more than enough. The scent of lavender oil and fresh paint lingered in the air, as Felix tightened the last bolt on the bookshelf in Savina's new office, this one. Not perched above the city in a tower of glass, but tucked within the newly restored brick and glass Harper Walker Community Center. The walls were warm cream, the windows wide and sun-rich, and the furniture, though modern, had been chosen with comfort over optics. Savina adjusted a framed photo on the desk. I still can't believe how fast it all came together. Felix set down the wrench and brushed a speck of sawdust from his shirt. You made it happen. You didn't just fund it, you built it. Every room has your fingerprints. I wanted it to feel different, she said, turning to face him. Not corporate, not cold, a place where someone can show up messy and be seen. He walked toward her, arms folding around her waist. You did that. This place feels like second chances. Her expression softened. So do you. Outside, the courtyard buzzed with volunteers setting up for the first open house. Kids chased balloons, staff arranged brochures, and a string quartet tuned instruments beneath a white canopy. Inside, Savina's staff, hired from the very neighborhoods the foundation served, moved with the ease of people who knew the value of what they were building. You sure you don't want some big investor press event? Felix asked, brushing her hair behind her ear. She shook her head. No cameras. No speeches, just people. The ribbon cutting had come and gone, the headlines had died down, and in the quiet after the storm, they'd found something neither of them had expected: peace. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of clarity. Savina had stepped down from the CEO role at Zeller Tech 2 months ago, not in disgrace, but by choice. She'd passed the torch to someone she trusted and walked away with her legacy intact and her soul unburdened. "I've spent most of my life building empires," she'd told Felix the night she made the decision. "Now I want to build something that actually matters." The foundation had become that something, and Felix, he had found his own rhythm. He'd taken on a full-time position at the center, managing outreach programs and mentoring young parents navigating the same struggles he once knew intimately. For the first time in years, he wasn't just surviving, he was building. They stepped outside into the courtyard, cheers rising as Harper sprinted toward them, a plastic tiara askew on her head and glitter on her elbows. "Daddy, Miss Savina, they said I can help give the tour," Felix crouched, lifting her into his arms. "You mean you're the official guide now?" she nodded solemnly. "I know where everything is, even the secret snack drawer in the staff lounge." Savina leaned in, stage whispering, "That was supposed to be a surprise." Harper giggled, throwing her arms around both of them. "It's okay. I like surprises." As guests began filing through the center's front doors, Savina glanced at Felix. "You ready?" he nodded, taking her hand. "I've never been more ready for anything." The day passed in a blur of laughter and connection. Harper led groups through the halls like a seasoned professional, only occasionally forgetting where the bathrooms were. Felix gave impromptu talks about the center's mentorship programs. And Savina moved like someone who had finally found her pace, not rushing, not performing, just present. As evening fell and the last of the guests waved their goodbyes, Felix found her on the rooftop garden newly installed with benches and fairy lights strung between trellises. She stood at the edge, looking out as the sky turned gold. He approached slowly, slipping his arms around her from behind. "Tired?" he murmured into her hair. "Exhilarated," she said. "You know what the best part is? Tell me." No one asked about my portfolio or my stock options, just what I cared about. He turned her gently to face him. "What do you care about, you?" she whispered. "Harper." "This." He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a small velvet box her breath caught. "I've been carrying this for a while," he said softly, "waiting for the right moment. But I realized there's no perfect time. Life's always going to be messy. But if I get to face that mess with you, then I want that." He opened the box. Inside, nestled in dark velvet, was a silver band with a single oval sapphire the same deep blue as Harper's eyes. Savina stared, stunned. "Felix." "I don't have a yacht," he said, voice thick, "or a mansion. But I have a home, with you, with Harper, and I want to wake up every morning knowing that whatever happens, we get to face it together." She touched the ring, her fingers trembling. "Yes," he blinked. "Yeah, yes," she said again, laughing through tears. "Absolutely yes." He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit like it had always belonged there. Behind them, the fairy lights flickered on, casting a soft glow over the rooftop. They didn't need applause or cameras. They had each other, and that was more than enough. 3 months later, they married under the same canopy where the string quartet had played during the center's opening. The ceremony was simple, heartfelt. Felix wore a navy suit Harper had picked out, and Savina wore a soft ivory dress with pockets she kept jelly beans in for Harper, Mrs. Denton officiated because no one had been more witness to their journey. As they exchanged vows, Harper stood between them, holding both their hands. "I now pronounce you a family," Mrs. Denton said, voice thick with emotion, and they were, in every sense. After the wedding, they danced barefoot on the grass. There was no DJ, just an old record player spinning vinyl classics. Felix twirled Savina under the stars, his palm warm against her back. "You know what I love most about this?" she asked, resting her head on his chest. "What?" "That we made it here without changing who we are," he kissed her forehead. "We just finally let the world see it." Harper darted past them, chasing fireflies. "Do you think she remembers what life was like before?" Savina asked. "I hope not," Felix said. "But I hope she always remembers what it became." They stayed long after the guests had gone, lying on a blanket in the grass, Harper asleep between them, the stars wheeling overhead, a new life, a real life. One made not of headlines or fortune, but of late-night laughter, shared burdens, and quiet, steady love. In the months that followed, the foundation flourished. More centers opened. Lives changed because of them, because of what they built together. Felix kept baking pies. Savina started teaching workshops. Harper became the unofficial mascot of every center, her tiaras growing more elaborate with time. And every night, no matter how long the day had been, they returned to the same small apartment, the one that now held more than second-hand furniture. It held a family, a love story that had begun with a shared granola bar in a grocery store line, and ended with everything they never dared to dream together. Always.